Hello Zaniacs, welcome back to Zaniac TV. I'm your host Zane, and today we're going to be going over week 11 affixes that is Fortified, Sanguine, Grievous, and Prideful. If anyone has any questions, I do stream live on Twitch 4 days a week. I also offer Mythic Plus analytics and coaching through Patreon. For this video, we ran Theater of Pain on a 15. For those of you tanking last week who thought that you were able to pull a certain amount of mobs, but this week you're unable to do that and you're not sure why, well, that's because you can't. This week is Fortified. You will not be able to pull as large because the trash packs hit harder and bosses are way easier. Nope, that does not mean you don't have to do mechanics, because you still do. Just because the bosses die faster and don't hit you as hard does not mean you're able to avoid having to do mechanics. There's just a lot less time spent on the bosses, so you think you don't have to do as much mechanics, but still be careful. Last week I was actually talking about getting rid of Dampen Harm as a talent. I felt I didn't need it anymore. Things were getting hitting me a lot less, and then this week it's like, oh my god, why is Dampen Harm still on cooldown? The level 4 affix this week is Sanguine. Sanguine means every time you kill a trash mob, they drop a pool of blood. If they stand in the pool of blood, they heal. If you stand in the pool of blood, you take damage. This affix is a bit of a headache for tanks because you have to pull them out and do a consistent amount of kiting. If stuff dies too fast and they stand in it, well, they're going to get healed, which means more damage that the DPS have to do for them to die, and since it's fortified, it means that's even more health that they take back. And the worst part is if they're casters, then they're standing in the pool of blood and you have to get them to come out somehow. This is where you get to be creative. What do you have as a knockback? What do you have as a pushback? What do you have as a pull? What do you have as an interrupt? How can you get the mob out of the pool of blood? Some of the things I do as a monk is I use Clash to pull them out, or I use Ring of Peace to push them out. Another trick I did in this run was I actually used line of sight to my advantage, where I killed some of them on one side of the wall, then I went to the other side of the wall and killed the rest of them. The absolute worst possible thing you can do in Sanguine is stun or root them in the blood, because that way they'll heal up and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, Sanguine is also very annoying in tight hallways, which is why I picked Theater of Pain, because you'll see that on platforms and on tight hallways, Sanguine can get a little bit of a mess. So the best thing you can do as a tank is try to get them to die somewhat in the same area without them stacking on top of each other. Unless you kill them all at the same time, then sure, stack them all together. There's no bursting this week, so last week everyone was used to killing everything somewhat separately. This time, if you can kill them all together, the pools of blood will be stacked in the same area. But if you don't, then you're going to have to try to pull them out of the Sanguine. Now, if you run a level 7 or higher, you're going to have to deal with the affix of Grievous. What Grievous is it puts a dot on you if your health falls below a certain percentage. And the dot stacks up to 4 times. So Blizzard decided, you know what, let's give healers a problem twice in a row. The good news is about Grievous is if you do a single target heal on yourself, or if you're a healer doing it onto a target, it removes 1 stack of Grievous. So you shouldn't be having more than 1 or 2. As a monk tank, I'm able to use Expel Harm to get rid of 1 of the stacks. So I'm always using that on cooldown, even if I don't actually need it. Now, if you play a Paladin, Shaman, Priest, Monk, or Druid in any specialization, you can help with Grievous by off-healing Grievous off of players. Your single target quick heal will help remove stacks of Grievous, so that way your healer can help catch up. An issue with Grievous this week is that it is paired up with Sanguine. So if players are standing in the pools of blood, it will increase your chances of getting Grievous and increase your stacks. So you're going to want to do your best, even more so, to position Sanguine in such a way that players can't be standing in them, because we don't want to double the affix by having Grievous stacks up. Now, how does all this affect Prideful? Well, most weeks they generally don't affect Prideful, but this week is actually very dangerous for Prideful. When you kill an enemy, the Sanguine, of course, is going to go down on the ground, so you're not going to want to stand in that. But Grievous will still be in effect with Prideful. When Prideful does their AoE damage, they're going to give out stacks of Grievous. So now, Prideful is very healing intensive. If you have extra enemies while you pull Prideful and it drops a pool of blood, you're going to have to reposition it so that way you're not standing in that pool of blood. Plus, with all of the massive amounts of AoE damage, plus the unnecessary Grievous stacks just stacking, your healer is going to have a really difficult time. So make sure you don't make it difficult for them. Since it is fortifying instead of tyrannical, some people are going to want to use Prideful on different trash packs. Others will still say, you know what, let's just delete the bosses as quickly as possible and just get through this. Both are acceptable, but depending on the group that you're with, you're going to want to determine when exactly you want to pop Prideful. But the biggest worry I have about Prideful this week is the fact that it adds stacks of Grievous. So if your group is already somewhat damaged before Prideful comes out, it's just going to be even more healing intensive than it needs to be. So last week, a lot of the dungeons were more difficult, mostly because of the tyrannical fact. This week is going to be a little bit different. Due to these affixes, Sanguine Depths with their tight hallways is going to be incredibly difficult to maneuver around with Sanguine. Try your best to drop them at the edge of the hallways and do your best to not walk through them. Plus, of course, that gauntlet does not do anybody favors. In Necrotic Wake, a lot of people do very narrow routing due to the strict percentage that you have to deal with. So the Sanguine is going to be a little rough with that, plus casters standing in that Sanguine. Spires of Ascension has very limited platform room, plus the casters are going to stand in the Sanguine, so you have to do your best to pull them out. In Theater of Pain, the most problem I had was actually the platforms. Some of the tight hallways were a little bit of trouble, but it was mostly the platforms. Plaguefall has a lot of range and casters, so be careful of those. Mists of Trina's Scythe, the early trash, does hit very hard, plus adding Sanguine with as well as narrow areas. Plus, the other side, having to deal with Ardenweald, open space, a lot of patrols. You don't want to get Sanguine there, and it's also going to be very healing intensive with Sanguine. And Grievous. I really wouldn't worry too much this week. It's just a little bit more stressful on tanks because we have to pull them out of Sanguine. Healers do have it a bit rough yet again, so try to be kind to them as best as possible because the Grievous is going to really hurt them, especially on the Prideful. However, the good news is that you can heal out of Grievous, so it's not nearly as bad as last week with bursting explosives. So, just really focus on getting it done. Remember, timers are a little deceptive. You might be able to just make it just by a couple of seconds because bosses don't nearly take as long. Be mindful of your surroundings. Don't stand in blood. You got this. I believe in you. You can do this. I do hope this video was a great help to you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, go ahead and drop it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.